An emerging issue confronting trademarks and brands is the evolving technology of 3D printing. And joining us right now to discuss this issue, we have a very distinguished panel. Michael Kelly of Kenyon & Kenyon, Todd DeVoe of Thomas Horstemeyer, LLP, and Mark Trachtenberg of Greenberg Traurig, LLP. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
First of all, Mark, what is 3D printing for people who don't know, and why is this something that trademark professionals should be concerned about?
Additive manufacturing, as it's known in the industry, is the process of creating any physical object by adding layers of material based on a digital file or digital map. It's different from traditional manufacturing or machining processes, which are subtractive in nature, which create objects by removing material. How does it affect trademark owners? In a variety of ways. Some of yet have not been determined yet. But where consumers and people in all parts of the world have the ability to create virtually any object, the object itself may have trademark implications, or they may create an object that has a trademark on it, or perhaps multiple trademarks.
Have there been other innovations that we could gain some, we can learn from our experience from?
I think you see a lot of comparisons to Napster, and there's some similarity there where you have a digital file that can be easily shared over the internet. So there are issues where if there is an infringing file, for example, it can be rapidly shared everywhere, and then as the printing technology becomes more mainstream and more consumers have it, you have a capacity for, in an infringing case, a tremendous amount of infringement that could take place.
So I suppose it depends on what's being printed, but what industries do you think will be affected first by this technology?
Yes, well, what we've seen in the newspapers and what gets the press has been handguns. And there was an article in the Tokyo, Japan paper on just this last Friday where someone had been arrested for 3D printing a handgun. The file had been obtained on the internet through a file sharing and was printed out on a printer that was only 60,000 yen, or about $600. Those are the ones that see the news, but probably something more like toys and action figures may be more impacted first. But what we're seeing is the file sharing. Pirate Bay has announced that it will offer file sharing like Napster. And so that runs the risk that we'll be seeing all types of various 3D files available on the internet to produce most anything.
You mentioned Napster. How is 3D printing different from Napster?
Well, one of the issues with 3D printing and comparing it to Napster is that Napster is very easy to categorize as a copyright issue. You're generally sharing videos and music. 3D printing opens that up to all different areas of intellectual property. Now you could be printing designs, so you're possibly copyright. Now you have possible design patent, design rights, trade dress. So it just opens up the door to the original problem, which is file sharing. Now that file sharing could be almost any 3D object that someone could be printing.
You mentioned toys. Will there be industries that are affected more severely than others?
With the state of the technology now, the printers that are available to most consumers are of much lower quality than those available to other manufacturers in the industry. So what we'll see first probably is the proliferation of more simple objects, things like action figures, simple toys, things that don't necessarily need to be assembled, and that's many toys. But from there, as the printers become more advanced and the capabilities increase, we're going to see a lot more industries be affected. Probably clothing, shoes, all sorts of items.
Are there laws currently on the books to regulate 3D printing? I know this is such a new technology. Are you aware of any?
At least in the United States, there are no specific 3D printing laws. There are a lot of different mechanisms for controlling intellectual property or protecting intellectual property that might apply to 3D printing, particularly in the file sharing. The industry and intellectual property attorneys have been dealing with file sharing for many years. Those tools are still available to us, but nothing specific.
Is there case law, perhaps in other countries, that's been established? Or is anyone aware?
I think I did read somewhere where the UK is considering some changes in its design laws as a result of 3D printing, but nothing definitive yet.
We've talked about challenges for trademark professionals when it comes to this technology. Are there benefits?
I think there are tremendous opportunities here, both from protecting intellectual property and then also just as far as new industries. And for one example, I read about a company in California that was using 3D printing to do instant prototyping. This company specialized in add-on accessories for iPhones. So they would use this to both prototype new accessories for when they were releasing new iPhone models so they could get to market faster. And they also had a concern where they were sending their prototypes overseas and they weren't sure about the security of the data files that they were sending. And they had issues where they would see these products coming back in knockoff versions, and now they can do all their prototyping in-house. So they have a lot more data security as far as their prototype files.
Any idea who will benefit most from 3D printing?
I think both the general public and industry. Mm-hmm. In addition to rapid prototyping, there are a number of other benefits. For example, in the healthcare industry, they're able to use 3D printing to scan people's bodies and create customized prosthetics that are designed specifically for a person's body. There are some medical device manufacturers who have been using 3D printing actually for a number of years. Invisalign has been using 3D printing, I believe, for over 5 years. And instead of having a large manufacturing facility, they have much smaller facilities, some I think the size of this very small room, that produce the vast majority of their products.
What new legal challenges does this pose, do you think?
I think at this point it's really unclear, but one thing that is clear is that this technology will exacerbate existing legal issues. So, for example, a lot of people think about 3D printing and they think about maybe the lone person, at home with their 3D printer or going to a 3D printing shop. But I think what we're going to see is the proliferation of this technology to infringers worldwide, where people, instead of having large factories, are going to be able to operate in very small spaces and produce vast numbers of counterfeit goods. And so I think we're going to see an exponential proliferation of existing counterfeit and fraud issues.
Todd?
Yes, on the manufacturing side, that makes those manufacturing sites much more portable as well. But something else I think we have to consider is the companies may have to reconsider their distribution, product distribution, and how they approach product distribution, just like the music industry. And if they're more adaptive to reconsidering how they distribute their product and consider, for example, distributing product through files on the internet as opposed to actually sending product out to stores or through Amazon. I think they'll have to consider that as a change in the way they do business.
How does this apply to existing case law?
The products will be made, they'll be distributed. It'll give the impression that this is original goods distributed by the manufacturer. So I think we can apply counterfeiting principles to this, particularly when we are looking at not the one-off child in their house printing out a Darth Vader, but when we're looking at an industry that's built around mass production of 3D products.
Well, I think when you talk about case law, you could probably use cases like Napster and Grokster as a guide. And what we're going to see, as Todd mentioned earlier, Pirate Bay already announced that they're going to support and provide 3D files for digital files for 3D printing. And I think we're going to see a number of other online services. And again, using Napster and Grokster as a guide, what we're going to see is that these services are not going to have liability for providing access to those files to the extent that they're not participating in either obtaining the files or creating them. And so I think there's going to be a huge enforcement problem for brand owners and for the industry. Unlike Napster and content, you may not always have the availability to leverage copyright law. In the United States, at least, the Digital Millennium Copyright Act allows content owners to rapidly take down infringing content. So, certainly in some cases, brand owners will have the ability to leverage copyright law and the DMCA for certain objects, but in many other cases, that probably won't be available to them. And in those cases, enforcement's going to become a significant challenge.
What's your best advice to trademark owners who are dealing with this issue right now?
You're going to have to consider a multidisciplinary approach. I think you're going to have to consider both trademark aspects, more on the counterfeiting side, as well as design rights and copyright. Copyright can go to the shape of the article a little bit easier, I think, a little bit faster than trying to go through trademark rights and claim distinctiveness. And there may be a question of whether scanning a 3D article and creating a data file from that scan might be a derivative work under copyright law. And so that may be an approach to consider from the copyright side.
I would just say as a general matter to stay proactive and to embrace the technology. I think going back to the Napster example, I think there was a lot of industry resistance to embrace a digital distribution for music. And then now you see over the last decade you've gone from a somewhat crude by comparison distribution mechanism through Napster through all the way up to iTunes, and now you can rent movies. So this will over the next 10, 20 and beyond number of years, this is going to revolutionize a lot of different industries. And I think those companies that stay proactive and that embrace the technology and stay imaginative and innovate will be the companies that are ahead of the curve on this.
Todd, Michael, and Mark, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having us.